Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traversing the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. As always, hit that subscribe button, everybody. We have an amazing show for y'all because boarding the mothership is Aaron Glenane. You know him as the Last Australian in Snowpiercer. He now stars in Interceptor, now on Netflix. Now come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Glenane. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Totally my pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours, especially from Snowpiercer. Definitely a pleasure to have you.
Cool. That's a really fun show. So, I'm stoked that you love it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a really smart program, and it balances a huge cast of characters. It's definitely an ensemble. And how does it feel to fit into that kind of an ensemble piece?
It was wild. I mean, that whole project was a really interesting one for me because, I'd been working in Australia for 11 years at that time. My initial audition was I was back in Australia doing a job on the Gold Coast. I auditioned up there. I'd gone back to LA where I'd just moved and started living, and then did my call back in the room in LA, and then I waited a little while and then booked a job. So it was my first job after having moved to Los Angeles, and first US job essentially, although it was shot in Vancouver. And so that in and of itself was really exciting because it's something that I'd dreamed of for a very long time. And for that to come to fruition was just a really big deal. LA from Australia feels so far away, and it's a dream that you have, but you're not quite sure whether it's tangible or not. And then so, when it comes to a head, it's like, oh man, that's actually doable. So that was really cool. And then getting to work with that ensemble and like you said, figuring out your place in amongst this amazing cast of actors, and again in this kind of incredible dystopian setting is it took a little moment to go, okay, what's my piece here in amongst this puzzle. And But I feel like it's like that with a lot of TV. The first few episodes kind of figuring it out, going, okay, what does this character do? What does that character do? What are the relationships? And that becomes clearer as over time, as everyone starts to get a feel for what everyone's doing. But there's some highly talented people on that show. So it was, sometimes you would just kind of feel like an audience member watching, and then you're like, oh shit, that's my line. Okay. Watching Jennifer Connelly and Sean Bean and David and kind of everyone on that was just a bit of a masterclass in acting. So yeah, it was cool.
So when you're in an ensemble, I would imagine as an actor, we all have a level of ego and you all want to have the scene, kind of choose some scenery, but when you're in an ensemble, kind of have to meld with what's going on with all the other actors. Is it hard to balance between wanting that moment, that spotlight, but also becoming part of the larger picture?
Yeah. I think that's that's definitely the learning curve. Each job kind of provides a different kind of takeaway, and I'm not sure if that was the biggest ensemble I'd been part of. I'd just come off the back of doing a Vietnam War film prior to doing Snowpiercer. And, that is a lot of dudes wearing green outfits. Everyone kind of looks relatively the same. And so that's kind of a similar thing in that it's, you're trying to define your character in amongst this large group of people. And sometimes you feel like you need a little bit to be able to showcase that, but also it's kind of the, knowing the story that you're telling and where you sit within that, and just making those moments really clear and defined, and doing something interesting in those moments that you might have, that, you know, if you want them to be bigger but they're not, you can still find ways to make them really captivating and interesting, and ways that reveal character. So yeah, that was a really good takeaway on that one. Yeah.
How tempting is it to be like Samuel L. Jackson in Attack of the Clones? Like, I'm gonna have a purple lightsaber so people can see me in the crowd. Like, have like a little flare on you when you're in a big scene with everyone wearing green.
Totally, man. I think that's, I mean, yeah, you definitely pick up little tricks of the trade as far as like ways to pop. I think Sam Neill. I worked with Sam Neill not that long ago, and
wow.
he did something. I can't exactly remember how this played out, but it was something along the lines of exiting a scene, and I can't, like, in my memory, I like to imagine that he said to me just before the take, he's like, "Watch this," but I don't think that actually happened. But he did something where, you know, he's exiting a scene, and then just before he exits, he doesn't have any dialogue. He does a look back, thinks, and then walks off. And I watched it, and I'm like, oh man, it just makes you want to keep watching. It gives you this alluring feeling of, oh, he's going to say something else. No, he doesn't. And it's just this moment of suspense. It's just a tiny little beat, but kind of similar to that Samuel L. Jackson thing of an enticing thing, or finding ways to make yourself pop. And I thought Stephen Ogg on Snowpiercer, you know, he'd played, you know, a lot of characters with that kind of moral ambiguity, and he had some really good insights on how to kind of layer in subtext into a scene where you know, the scene might be kind of, oh, should we go and fight, or should we, no, let's hold off and let's not go into battle just yet, and keep ourselves safe back here. And he had some really good insights on layering in other things into scenes like that, which can, you know, help make you pop out or be interesting or something outside of the box. So Stephen definitely taught me a lot. I really admire what he does.
And also that you were in some scenes with Sam Neill. Sam Neill is one of my all-time favorite actors, because I'm a Jurassic Park guy from all the way back. And, you know, that's must have been an incredible experience. That guy just seems just awesome.
Oh man, he really is. It's, you know, it's that thing, you know, like a similar quality to Jennifer, in that they can just be walking in a scene and you're captivated by them. You're just going, you know, it's that sort of thing where you're going, you're actually doing nothing, but I can't stop watching you. And trying to figure out what that is, you know, whether that's something just innately within them or whether that's something they've developed over time, is really interesting to kind of try and dissect and watch. But man, he was amazing. Yeah, in this job we did together, it was called Ride Like a Girl, and Teresa Palmer was in it as well. It's a great story of the largest horse race in the Southern Hemisphere, which is in Melbourne, and it's the story of the first female jockey who won that race. Teresa Palmer plays the jockey and Sam plays her father, and he had this monologue in it, and similar thing. You're just sort of watching him, and every take he's delivering and doing something slightly different and unpredictable, and it was just, you know, those moments are just so special when you get to work with people like that.
So when you're an actor in these scenes with these other actors, someone who you may even admire or whatever, is it hard to sometimes catch yourself and remember that you're still in the scene as well doing your character? Or do you sometimes get lost a little bit? You're like, oh, hey, I'm watching these guys perform their parts, you know?
Oh, big time. Yeah. Like I said earlier, it's that, you know, like I had that moment with Sean Bean, just kind of watching him do his thing, because it's the same thing. Yes, sometimes people are that alluring and captivating. You're like, oh, far out. Yeah, I kind of just got caught up in what you're doing there. But it's also a thing of, doing Snowpiercer. Like I said, I had so much anticipation around that first sort of US job. It's, yeah, I was like a little nervous going into it. And, but it's kind of amazing how similar it is to any other job in between action and cut. It's kind of like, as soon as you start jumping into the scene and shooting, it's in a way the same as a short film you did 10 years ago. It's almost the same, except there's a shit ton of money, like crazy sets and incredibly talented people. Not to say that there wasn't on a short film, but it's it's amazing how quickly you slide in and you go, oh yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. I've got this. And and the bounce of the scene is kind of what always sort of pulls you back in as an actor. Yeah.
So when I was doing some research on you, I read that you're acting with you went to the Actor's Pulse, where you learn what's called the Meisner technique. Now, what is special about that technique? How is it different than other types of acting techniques?
Yeah, well, there's kind of back in the group theater days, which was like I guess around the 50s, there was kind of the Stella Adler, Meisner, and kind of people, coaches or teachers, or branched off into sort of two different ways of thinking. One was taking it, I guess it's called personalization or substitution, where what you use in your acting work is taken from your own life, something that was really meaningful that happened to you. So say I'm doing quite a traumatic scene, I would think of something really traumatic that happened in my life, kind of place that on top of the scene and let myself fall into it that way. Whereas the Meyerson technique works a lot more in what's actually happening in the moment from actor to actor, and kind of in your imagination. So being able to place yourself into the given circumstances of the character and really imagining what they would be going through. So I guess the debate between the two is, one is that you're kind of pulling from the past a little bit, and whereas Meisner's more trying to stay in the present and imagining the future sort of thing. So they're the kind of two differences between the two big kind of ways of working. But Meisner also has the kind of the basis of the technique is called the repetition exercise, where it's kind of basically, I would say to you right now, you're listening, or you're curious, or you're observant, and I'm calling your behavior, and we kind of say that back and forth to each other to be like, you're listening, I'm listening, you're listening, I'm listening. Oh, you're smiling, you're happy. And it's kind of this thing of really connecting with the other actor, looking at what's happening moment to moment, not trying to play a moment or imposing something on it to be interesting, but just knowing that you yourself are interesting enough, and bouncing off the other person in the moment, rather than pre-planning something, so that when you bring text onto it, you have this instinctive bounce between actors, rather than going, this is how I'm going to do this moment, or this is what I'm going to place on here. It's alive in the moment, which is a little scary as an actor, because to be able to all you want to do is be able to control what you're doing, but to be able to live freely in the moment, like Joaquin Phoenix is an incredibly unpredictable actor, or Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't know if they're Meisner actors, but they definitely work in that way of unpredictability, which I think is what the Meisner technique is angling for. Yeah.
So how do you get yourself comfortable enough to let yourself go with unpredictability through the Meisner technique? Is that hard to get comfortable with, or is it something that you're just naturally closer to your personality?
I think over time, it's definitely it's kind of like doing improv or something. You're like, you want to be able to plan your comedy and go, oh, this gag's going to work. But, improv is inherently, spontaneous in the moment. So it's a similar, it is nerve wracking, but I guess the more and more you do it over time, you find confidence in it. And those moments of spontaneity are so rewarding when they really come to a head. Like you might read a scene on the page that is quite a loving scene, but for whatever reason, when you're doing it with the other actor, if you're being spontaneous, it comes across a little edgy or snarky or something, but the text is saying I love you, but you're like, yeah, I really love you, and it's like, oh, suddenly it becomes alive, and that is just so rewarding, and trying to find those kind of golden moments is that kind of that kind of really alluring part of acting, where you're like, I'm searching for those moments, and it's different, and that's a kind of interesting part working with different actors. Some people like to really map out what they're going to do, and they might not work in the same way that you work. So it's figuring that out and being adaptable and being a bit of a chameleon, I guess.
So, as the expert in the show right now, is there one technique that offers more flexibility for a greater range of performance, or eventually both techniques will get you to the end point that you want to get to if you're obviously good at acting?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely you kind of take what works for you. Like since studying Meisner, I've gone on and worked with Ivana Chubik, who is much more substitution based, personalization based, and that was super rewarding as well. And I use some of that stuff too, and as well as Howard Fine and Larry Moss. So I constantly like to keep trying to work with different people to get a new angle on something. I think about things in a different way, and for me, I kind of pull from everything a little bit, but I think it really is kind of finding what works for you, because what works for me might not work for someone else, and it's about trying to figure that out. That's the only thing about the acting industry that is a little bit different to others. There's no roadmap for anything. It's so it's what works for one person, it most likely won't work for you. There's a completely different trajectory and pathway, and that can be a little challenging at times, but navigating your way through, that's all part of it. Yeah.
So when you're in Snowpiercer, you get to play with the characters known as the Last Australien. Now, any pressure to be in the very last Australian in the world for Snowpiercer?
Oh my God. Totally. That's it. All my character research was really just Australian history. So yeah, I was just going, this guy would be desperately trying to just remember every piece of home, and hold on to that culture and try and find a way to carry it on. His super objective for the whole thing is probably just to make babies and continue the Aussie lineage.
Right.
I definitely felt pressure of representing an entire nation. But when I read the audition, actually my first audition, which I don't know if I've talked about this publicly, but my first audition was actually for Bennett.
Really?
Ido's character. And that was really fun. And they came back and they were like, "Oh man, great audition. We loved it. We think you'd be better suited for the tail." And I'm like, okay, fair enough. back of the train for you, front of the train privileges. But I actually feel quite akin with the tail characters, so that felt quite suitable to me. But when I read the character name, I was like, oh my God, that's got to be one of the best character names I've ever had come my way. You know, the Last Australian. He doesn't even go by a name anymore, and he almost doesn't even want to. He's just like, yeah, call me Aussie. You know, like, he's defined himself by the Aussie culture, and yeah, so really, really fun character.
Now, in season 3, beginning of season 3, that we're told that he's died of the flu. When season 2 was happening, did they tell you what the trajectory of the character was going to be, or were you like the last to know that your character was not going to see past season 3?
No. That was kind of that was a COVID thing, really. It was yeah, we were shooting season 2, and we got to about the episode 7 or 8, I think, is my last episode in that, and you know, episode 8, 9, and 10 were written completely differently, and you know, myself and a lot of other characters that weren't in those episodes were involved in that, but COVID hit around episode 7, production shut down. Myself, my wife Rach, and our little baby came back to Australia just with one suitcase, going, oh, we'll be back soon. COVID developed. We were like, oh, I guess we're going to be here for a little bit. They came back and shot the rest of season 2, which they'd sort of rewritten in a way that just kept the core cast, just to have limited, you know, not too many people around, which then turned into those really cool scenes kind of around that dinner table, which I thought, you know, kind of worked really well. And, you know, Sam Otto gets to play that beautiful kind of musical piece on the piano. But that was all completely rewritten because of COVID. And then finding ways to bring people back became really challenging. And yeah, so the Last Australian's demise was COVID related, unfortunately, which really sucked, because I was desperate to get back for it, but it just couldn't happen. But I would have rather someone said, oh, he like jumped off the train, or like he just does something kind of crazy and dramatic, and that you still didn't have to see. But I was like, man, if I've been in the ice and snow for this long and the flu gets me, I was like, oh, far out. I feel like I've had the flu a million times and living in the tail, but you know, that's okay.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
So technically COVID killed the Last Australian. That sucks.
yeah, you know, because we had that, you know, they were setting up that great storyline, and that was going to turn into a thing with, when I meet the other Aussie, kind of Amelia from Big Alice, you know, that was going to develop into a really beautiful little love story, which would have been really fun to do, and really sweet to kind of see that come to fruition. But you know, things happen.
Now
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. If memory serves, you never actually see the body. So I mean, the show's still going. Is it possible you can be like, hey, he was hanging, you know, in the closet the entire time, you just thought he was dead, and you can come back?
Totally. You know, I've definitely thought about that, and kind of flagged it with a film. I'm like, you know, just because, you know, I think was it Pike that said I died of the flu? I mean, Pike is the most untrustworthy character. So, you know, whatever he says, you know, you take with a grain of salt. So, you know, it'd be awesome if I came back in some badass way and just like started slaying people, and with like 10 babies in tow, kind of like the latest Thor, you know,
right.
like Thor with all these little kids just going, ah.
Right. So we now create a hashtag bring back the Last Australians.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need to get this going viral or something. Start a little campaign.
Totally agree. So were you surprised by just how popular Snowpiercer turned out to be?
Was I surprised by it? Well, you know, I'd obviously seen the film, and you know, knew how that cult following had developed over time. And I just thought the film was amazing. I I don't know if I was surprised. I thought that I just love the graphic novels and the film, and had so much belief in the show that I just thought it had all the ingredients to be a really freaking killer show. And I feel like it really delivers in a lot of ways. And having people like Jennifer and David and Sean and all of the actors, it's like which doesn't obviously guarantee success with anything. But yeah, I don't think I was surprised. I really believed in it from the get-go. But sometimes you really believe in something and it doesn't play out. But
Yeah.
sometimes the stars align as well. And but all the creatives, as far as I thought the CG just looks awesome in that show as well. And apparently anything in the elements, like as far as water, fire, snow, apparently that's the hardest stuff to create. And I just thought it looks so real and believable, and magical. So it's an enticing world to dive into. Yeah.
So if Aaron Glenane was in Snowpiercer, would he be in the back of the train, or do you think you'd make it to the front?
I think, yeah, as me myself, I think I'm very suited to the tail. But also, being an actor makes you quite tenacious. And so I think I'd find a way to get to the front. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of in that, yeah. I thought there were a few little similarities between the Last Aussie and the kind of Jamie Bell character in the movie. And he gets pretty close to getting up the front. So yeah, I feel like the Last Aussie get a few footsteps in the engine for sure.
So you're also in another movie that's on Netflix called The Interceptor. So how do you get involved in The Interceptor, and what excited you about the opportunity for being in the movie?
Oh yeah, Interceptor was awesome. How did I get involved? Well, I got involved. It was just another general audition that came through. I'd worked with one of the writers before on this Vietnam War film, Danger Close, and so I had that relationship with him. But it was definitely going through the audition process and doing it that way. Why did I want to get involved? Well, firstly, it's just a kick-ass action film, and in Australia, because the system is just set up differently, and that a lot of the Australian funding is to make films goes through government funding. We don't have the kind of studio system here, so because everything goes through government funding, there's a cultural element to what the funding body selects. And so a lot of times action films don't really find a way to tie into the way the funding body wants to culturally represent the Australian storytelling, I guess, which I hope shifts over time, because there's a clearly a whole avenue of viewers and stories through the action world that is so exciting. So yeah, I'm kind of rambling a bit, but getting to make an action film was fucking awesome. So exciting.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting about it is that it's filmed by Australians, but it's kind of like their view of United States military. So it's kind of like an interesting kind of like perspective from a different, from this side of the world.
Yeah, I know. I read it that way as well. I was like, oh, there's some stuff in here that, like, it's popcorn cheese action, but there's a couple of moments in there, especially when Luke Bracey has his monologue where, these Aussie writers who, Matthew's lived in LA for 7 or 8 years, and Stuart Beattie, it's kind of, he's done Pirates of the Caribbean, Collateral, the latest Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, he's been living in LA for a long time. So Aussie writers who are based in LA and have that kind of cross-cultural thing of, they're well ingrained in American culture. And Stuart might even be an American citizen now. But there's some stuff that's called out there that is from an Australian perspective, you're kind of looking at it going, yeah, that's kind of how Aussies might see it. But, as Americans, I was very curious to see, how some of those themes and ideas and points that are brought up kind of received. Because in Luke's monologue, it's it gets pretty raw in there. And it was also, like you said, it was all Aussie made, 100% Aussie cast, Aussie crew, Aussie writers, directors, telling this sort of American story. It was interesting for us, but probably more interesting hearing your guys' take on it. Going, oh man, these Aussies don't know what they're talking about, or they're way off, or whether it felt, somewhat accurate in moments. It's an interesting kind of little discussion.
I'll say, as an American watching the movie, it's surprising just how accurate it turned out to be. You're like, yeah, that's kind of like us. That sounds about right. It's like listening to someone from like outside, outside your house, talking to your door and going, "Hey guys, I'm kind of noticing this about your house," and you're just like, "Oh, yeah."
that kind of that cracked wall that you're trying to ignore, and you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to look at that. And it's like, okay, all right, fine. But I mean, every country has that. Australia definitely has their things that we like to sweep under the carpet or something. It's like, no, we really need to look at this and deal with this. And if an action film can kind of touch on those things, it's a great avenue to kind of have those moments of reflection and deeper thought, and then you get back to the kind of madness of an action film. So yeah.
So in the movie you play Beaver Baker. So what were you told about the character prior to getting the role?
What was it told about him? Well, I wasn't told too much. My audition scene was the very first scene that I have in the film, which is, I guess I'm trying not to get into spoiler territory, but the first scene's very much set up as, he's a guy, he's a bit crass, he's inappropriate, but he's on the right side of the ledger, trying to figure out what the hell these stolen nukes are about and what they're going to do about them. So I had a sense that, on the page he was kind of inappropriate, but not so much more than that. But I just had a sense that there was more to him than met the eye. And I was definitely trying to filter in this element of he's up to something dodgy in the long game. Which, when I got the full script after having, booked the job, I was like, oh shit, cool. I was right. And so I wasn't told too much about him. He was sort of written as like a general American accent, a kind of thing. But I'd, seeing the Alexander character, I'd really wanted to kind of push him in a completely different direction to make these two kind of villainous characters completely polarizing and watching it, you're sort of watching it going, how the hell did these two people end up together? Like, one comes from money, one feels like he doesn't come from that much money. One feels very kind of left in thinking, one feels very right in thinking. Like, how the hell did they kind of come together on this thing? That was, I did that as far as my haircut. I was like, Luke Bracey is an incredibly good looking man. So I wanted to make myself look incredibly just kind of not good looking. Like, I was like, shave my hair off, give me a dirty mustache, and let's make me somewhere much more specific than a general American accent. So they were all things that I wanted to bring to the table and make Beaver a really kind of defined character, rather than just a sidekick to Luke.
So Beaver is a horrible racist, and you do a great job playing it. Is there a concern of playing a character like that too well? Because sometimes be like, audience would be like, that motherfucker.
Oh man, well, it's I always like meeting people prior to them seeing the film. So hopefully they know that I'm nothing like Beaver. You know, I've actually had a couple of characters like this before, not like this, but with maybe somewhat similar beliefs. So it's terrain that I've tracked before, in a way. Definitely not the same as Beaver, but in a way. Yeah, but prior to doing it, yeah, there's deep concern because it's incredibly different to you, and you're reading these words and you're going, oh God, I feel sick saying some of this stuff, and all that stuff with Elsa, where I was getting sort of very intimate with her. You know, I'm apologizing in between takes, going, I'm so sorry to do this, and she was so up for it and everything. So it's, you know, she was awesome. But yeah, it's but when you're in it and thinking about it, you know, there's a justification for everything. So as Beaver, you know, as an actor, I really have to, you know, I'm not thinking of myself as a bad person or a villainous person. I'm thinking of myself as fighting for a belief system that has been indoctrinated to me in some way. And whether it was handed down from people before me or whether it's what I've picked up along the way. Yeah, I'm believing in it. But outside of thinking of Beaver, you know, all I wanted was for when Beaver kind of comes to the end of his story was for the audience to just to cheer and go, yes, that, oh God, you know, went down, you know, and so I was, you know, if I could be as, you know, be as nasty as I could, be as kind of inappropriate as I could, you know, I just wanted to lean right into it so that when he came to the end of his story, I wanted people to just be like, yes, like take that dude down. Like what's, oh my God, I'm going to forget the character's name from Game of Thrones, the young blonde prince
Oh
guy.
yeah. I can't remember his name, but I know what you're talking about.
Yes, like him. I remember watching him going, I hate this guy. And then like at the end of the episode, I'd be like, he's probably a really nice person in real life. So that is amazing acting. So I wanted to do something like that. I was like, oh man, he just left me with such a feeling. That yeah, I was trying to do that with Beaver. Yeah.
So another cool thing about Beaver, though, he is quite a funny character as well. So it's hard to balance like the humor of the character with also keeping the serious nature and also the intimidating nature of the character.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the fun thing as an actor. It's you know, trying to find different moments to bring out all this different personalities of the character. I think Jack Nicholson said something like, you know, what can I reveal in each new scene that hasn't been revealed about the character so far? And, you know, I think about that with my acting and go, what haven't we seen about this side of the character? Like, so that scene in the tunnel where Beaver's freaking out and going, shit, man, you know, I knew we should have killed her. Like, that was such a fun scene because it was Beaver in a bit of a panic and, you know, came across maybe quite comedic. I thought sort of watching it, I wasn't thinking that as I was doing it, but I was like, we haven't seen Beaver in a panic yet. And so I was really trying to lean into that or, yeah, that's kind of the fun part as an actor going, what haven't I showed about this person yet? What haven't we seen? And trying to kind of map that out as you go along. Yeah.
So also, and no, because you have a lot of a great fight scene towards the end of the movie. How much training did it take for you to do that? To, you know, be prepared for that scene?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there was an amazing stunt team on this in that Ingrid, who was the stunt coordinator, she has doubled Margot Robbie and a lot of the stuff she is done. Not just Margot Robbie, like kind of any any leading female action star, she's like stunt doubled her. Haley Wright, who doubled Elsa, she's being the double for the lead in the new Furiosa movie. Tim Wong, who was the other stunt coordinator, you know, he's been doing it for years. So we had this killer stunt team that were just absolute pros. And as far as time, I had, you know, maybe 4 sessions, 1.5 hour sessions with those guys to kind of figure out that scene, but probably only 1 rehearsal with Elsa, because, you know, out of all her fight scenes, our scene was probably the shortest. It was a little tricky because there was a few little things like the wire around the neck and the ball kick, and there's a few little tricky things in there, but it was a much shorter fight scene than some of our other ones. So we didn't have that much time together. We shot it in 1 day. It was actually that scene. We shot that scene. That was my last scene that we shot. And my wife was also pregnant and due right on that time. So we shot that scene in a day, which we were really, you know, there was quite a bit to get through as far as, you know, the whole fight, the throwing down the kind of tunnel. That was a bit to get through, but we smashed it out, got to the end of the day. Amazing. You finished. I called my wife Rachel on the way home. I'm going, hey, I'm finished. I'm done. She's like, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. When you get home, we need to go to the hospital. And I was like, oh my God. So I just finished that day and went straight to the hospital, and our second baby girl was born the next morning. And so it felt like a movie within a movie, that whole, that kind of whole sequence of you know, doing this cool fight scene. But going back to the fight scene, I hadn't done a fight scene like that before. I'd done a fair bit of war stuff and the kind of bits and pieces in Snowpiercer, but a one-on-one sort of fight scene I hadn't done before. So it was awesome. Yeah, I loved it.
That's awesome. Congratulations, by the way, on
thanks.
Like a kid. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pretty cool story how it all kind of came to be. Yeah.
Well, like you said, congratulations. So what was it like working with Matthew Riley, the director?
You know what? Like, that was Matthew's first time directing. And oh my God, he was spectacular. And why was he spectacular? He was spectacular because he was one of the most, I've had this a couple of times, but he was one of the most collaborative people I've ever worked with, in that he really wanted to hear my ideas. Like I was saying earlier, all those Beaver character ideas, he completely encouraged me to go for, told me to go further with them. Wanted to hear kind of script ideas, anything that I thought, you know, and I would throw stuff back to him. He'd take some on board. Others he'd be like, oh, that might not quite work. But it was all in this sense of collaboration. And even on set, you know, he was like a kid in a candy store. Like, talk about, you know, I think Michael Crichton, the writer, is his, you know, idol. And so, like, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, like that's his jam. Like, similar to what you were talking about earlier, like going, that's my jam too. It's like, that's Matthew Riley. And so, you know, he'd read the scenes for what we'd film each day and be like, oh my God, look, we're doing this scene today. This is going to be awesome. And so he was just so pumped up every day. And he knew everyone by name. All the crew, would check in with everyone, would, get them little gifts to say, man, you're doing a great job. You know, here's a bottle of wine for all the hard work you've done so far. And at the end, at the wrap party, I've never seen a crew get so excited when, you know, they say, oh, and here's our director to say a few words. Like, that crew and cast went absolutely bonkers when he got up and said a few words, purely because of the care that he invested in everyone. So I actually can't speak highly enough of him, especially as a first-time director. You know, it's kind of like, I mean, it was amazing. So I really hope he gets more opportunities to create his kind of badass action films, and and see what he can do with you know, a bit more scope and space and time and resources to be able to tell a slightly bigger story. And, you know, Beaver could always have a twin brother that, you know, and an eviler twin that can come back. And hopefully I get to work with him again, because yeah, he was amazing.
So for the listeners, where can they find Interceptor?
Yeah, well, yeah, Interceptor's on Netflix now. Check it out there. It's yeah, it did really well. It was like number 1 in 100 countries for about 2 weeks, I think. So, you know, it's that popcorn. There's get a bit of cheese out, because that's definitely in there. And yeah, it's just a fun little ride. So yeah, I don't know. I had a blast filming that.
So what's next for you?
I'm currently in Perth, which yeah, I live in Sydney at the minute, but I'm in Perth right now. I'm about to start shooting a job over here. I can't really say too much about it, other than that it's kind of in the True Detective vein as far as the type of story that it is. So yeah, and for once I'm on the right side of the law. Like I said, I usually always play dodgy characters, and when they said you know, we want you to play this good guy, I was like, hang on, have you cast the right person? Is there anything dodgy about this good character? And they're like, no, he's a genuine, good, nice guy. And I'm going, okay, this is going to be a real challenge for me. I haven't played a good guy in a long time. So yeah, it's here for 8 weeks, and yeah, I'm really excited about diving into it.
So when that's all said, you can come back on the show and talk about it.
Yeah, man, definitely.
Awesome.
Far out. I've loved chatting with you, Jeff. Yeah, I really appreciate your support and everything, man. It's nice to know these stories resonate with people. So yeah,
I think they definitely did. And Mr. Glenane, it's totally a pleasure talking with you. And like I said, when we're ready to talk about your new project, you come.
Definitely. I'd really love to. You too.